Billie Eilish, Billie Eilish, Billie Eilish, Billie Eilish, alongside my beloved Billie Eilish. Billie Eilish's Billie Eilish, Billie Eilish's Billie, as a Billie fan, Billie Eilish, Billie Eilish. Was it ever really about 6 Notes of Separation? Or was it just about Billie Eilish? Welcome to the final episode of 6 Notes of Separation. Yes, you heard me right. It is the final episode, but more on that later. If you're new to the podcast, this is how things have gone. Every episode, I dive into an artist, exploring their music, their lives, any scandals or controversies they might have been subject to. But I put my own little twist on things because I just love and adore to keep you on your toes. Each episode has to be linked to the previous and succeeding episode in some kind of way. This could be through a musician, a collaboration, a producer, a label, truly anything goes or anything went, as long as there was a link. But if you've been listening to the podcast for a while, you might have noticed, the use of past tense. No, I haven't gone mad. This is the last and final episode of 6 Notes of Separation. For those of you who are keeping up to date with the socials, you'll be well aware of the fact I've been an unemployed girly since the start of this year, since January. Alas, I have secured a job in the past month, hence the kind of break we had from the podcast. And in truth, I can't keep up podcast work and normal actual work. It's just too much. It's just too much. It just simply doesn't work. So we're ending the podcast. Fear not, there are more creative endeavours I am yet to explore and yet to journey into. So I don't want to be one of those people that says things are coming, but this isn't the end of me talking about music, but it is, as I keep saying, the finale of 6 Notes. As you know from the title and intro of this episode, I'm going to be diving into an artist who's earned a total of 32 Grammy nominations, 2 Oscars, 4 Brits, and 19 Guinness World Records, all before she's had the chance to turn 24. She's a musician that's changed the sound and look of what it means to be a pop artist and has personally connected with countless numbers of teens across the globe, myself being one of them. There's no one else 6 Notes could have started and ended with. Of course, I'm going to be diving into the life of Billie Eilish. Now, as a quick disclaimer for anyone that's been here from day one, you might remember that the first ever episode of this podcast was in fact in honour of Billie's new album Hit Me Hard and Soft. But as it was a pilot, it wasn't a proper episode of 6 Notes as you know it now. Why we're ending with Billie will become clear towards the end of this episode, but for now, let's crack on with the podcast. And let's reveal the link between Eilish and last episode's Kneecap. Some might call this link a little far-stretched, but the closest connection you're going to get between these two artists is through the producer of Kneecap's sophomore album Fine Art, Toddler T. Toddler T is a music producer who's married to the broadcaster and DJ Annie Mac. Annie Mac is a bit of an icon to me, so we're not going to get in a tangent there, but she was a presenter on BBC Radio 1 for 17 years, in which time she met and interviewed Billie many, many times. I believe they first met in 2019 when Billie did a live performance for Annie's show, and since then they've struck up a sweet bond through countless interviews they've had together since. Now 2019 is probably the year most of you would have first heard Billie's name being chucked around. But what about all the years in between then? Born in 2001 in LA, Billie Eilish Pirate Baird O'Connell was born. You might think that's one hell of a name, but Billie was actually going to be called Pirate had it not been for her granddad William passing away just before she was born. The pirate came from her much-loved brother Phineas, who's also a musician and producer, who was 4 years older than her and heavily obsessed with pirates at the time. And the Baird and O'Connell come from her parents Maggie Baird and Patrick O'Connell, both actors, musicians, and to be honest, just hustlers. Growing up, Billie and Phineas were homeschooled by their mum, who taught them how to songwrite in and amongst their normal academic classes. They had one rule in their house, though. They could stay up as late as they wanted, as long as they were doing something creative. And I think that tells you a lot about the environment Billie and her brother grew up in. They grew up in a household where pretty much creativity flowed right out of it. At the age of 6, Billie first learnt to play the ukulele. A year later, she wrote her first song, and let's just say the beginnings were humble. The lyrics of this song you can check out on James Corden's Carpool Karaoke, but they really consisted of the lines, "What a wonderful life." Little did she know she'd become defined by her dark and depressive songwriting just 9 years later. As a kid, Billie entered herself into every talent show she possibly could. Her ambitions being pretty clear when instructing her dad to learn the Beatles song Happiness is a Warm Gun on piano, so he could be her accompaniment. When she was 8, she joined the LA Children's Chorus, where she learned how to sing and harmonise, and by the time she was 11, she'd written her first quote-unquote adult song, basing the lyrics of one of her favourite TV shows at the time, The Walking Dead. However, Billie, although being the more recognised and perhaps successful, if you want to call that, sibling now, most definitely did not feel that way when she was a kid. Phineas was always described as the golden child. You know, he, like his parents, went into acting when he was younger and was somewhat successful too, landing a part in the iconic TV show Glee. On top of this, he was also part of a band called the Slightlies, which is why he ended up teaching himself how to produce music. A fun little connection for you on how Billie first became aware of Phoebe Bridgers was through her winning a Battle of the Bands competition that the Slightlies were performing in. The year was 2011. Billie was 10 at the time, Phineas 14, Phoebe 18. Obviously, Billie and her family were there to support the Slightlies, Phineas's band, and cheer them on for the win. But out of nowhere, Phoebe Bridgers, staying true to her character, defied all rules of Battle of the Bands and took to the stage alone, guitar in hand, singing her heartbreaking song Georgia, which was later re-released on her debut album Stranger in the Alps. I guess it goes without saying that Phoebe went on to win the whole damn competition, Phineas's band taking the second place medal. In Billie's words, Phoebe was a badass, and so maybe the next time you see them pictured at an event together, know that they've actually been childhood friends from the start. Moving on to a story you guys might be more familiar with though. Billie is now 13 years old and has just dyed her hair platinum blonde/silver. Her dance teacher was looking for a song to choreograph a contemporary dance to, so asked Billie and Phineas if they could make a song for him. To quickly interject, dance was a massive part of Billie and Phineas's childhood. More so, Billie's dance was really where she saw her career and her life going. At the start of 2015, Billie and Phineas had been putting songs up onto SoundCloud just for fun, which is how her dance teacher knew they could write. When they started releasing these songs, Phineas said to Billie as an absolute joke, "I'm going to make you the biggest pop star in the world." A couple of months later, and they recorded Ocean Eyes. The song was actually one Phineas had written for his band, but asked Billie to sing it after realising it would suit her voice better. They uploaded it to SoundCloud so a dance teacher could access it, and that was really that. There's actually quite a sweet story where Billie was on a trip with her dance company and all the girls gathered in a circle asking her to sing. When she finished performing, all the girls said she'd be as famous as Tinashe, who is a R&B singer that shot to fame this year and was also an alumni of the dance company. And of course, Billie humbly received this compliment and giggled to herself and was like, "Guys, you're being so silly. I could never be on the level of stardom that Tinashe is." And for context, Tinashe hadn't blown up then. Not like she has now thanks to TikTok. Like, it's funny really because Ocean Eyes began to rack up quite the number of streams on SoundCloud, growing from the thousands to the hundreds of thousands, at which point Phineas's manager, Danny Ruckerson, asked about the potential of Billie and Phineas making music together. In 2016, Danny and Phineas agreed to a deal with Apple Music where Billie would be signed to Platoon, a company that specialises in supporting emerging artists before they sign to a major record label. Later that year, the Ocean Eyes music video was released, which saw DJs such as Zane Lowe and Annie Mac take notice of the siblings. And just to quickly slip in here too, Billie had suffered from a growth plate injury when she was 13, which ultimately ended those dreams of becoming a dancer and taking that into her career. So the fact that music came into her life just as that crisis was happening came as an absolute blessing in disguise. After a year of meetings, Billie finally signed to Interscope Records in August of 2016 at the age of 14. By February of 2017, another fab artist connection is thrown into the mix for you. In 2011, it was Phoebe Bridgers, but in 2017, it was Doja Cat. Hell yes. If you listen to the episode on Doja, you already know how this story goes. But if you don't, around the time Billie was blowing up from this, I want to say the 2015 to 2017 period, there was a real emergence of upcoming talent all breaking through on SoundCloud. It's how Gracie Abrams and Billie first became friends, but it's also the origin story of Billie and Doja. Eilish was garnering quite a bit of hype around her name after the success of Ocean Eyes, the promotion from Apple Music, and of course her unique sense of style, the baggy clothes and bold colours, was there from day one. So she reached out to Doja to see if she'd rap a verse on her upcoming song, Bellyache. Sadly, at the time, Doja was experiencing intense creative block, so the collaboration never happened, but after seeing the success the song went on to have, Doja said she was super happy for Billie despite admitting that in hindsight, Bellyache perhaps didn't really fit Doja's vibe anyway. The video of Bellyache was released a month later in March and I guess became a real moment of significance in marking the public's first introduction to Billie's style. Ocean Eyes and that music video, Billie has always said she's hated it. It wasn't what she envisioned, it wasn't her, she didn't like it. I think Bellyache is where you really see that character and I guess, you know, the fashion icon that Billie's come through. The outfit and idea for the video was all chosen by her, the strong stylization becoming a pretty defining factor of her artistry, as I've just mentioned. It's also probably worth mentioning that a lot of her visuals came from her synesthesia, which is when the brain assigns a lot of different senses to one thing. So for example, when she was listening to Bellyache, the colour yellow would have jumped to mind, along with other specific tastes, shapes, numbers, etc. Like she's talked about it a lot in different interviews. In March, her song Bored was released and featured in the hit show 13 Reasons Why. And that summer, she went on to perform her first ever festival to a crowd of about 10, as well as touring as the opening act for growing artists Rai X and Michael. In August, her debut EP Don't Smile at Me was released, all of which was written and recorded when she was aged 14 and 15, and Phineas was 18 going on 19. But what really got her name out there, because Don't Smile at Me sort of became a sleeper hit, was being named as Apple Music's Up Next artist. Not only did this see her being promoted obviously on all the Apple Music playlists as much as possible, but it also saw Spotify feature her music on popular playlists too. After a couple of tours and some more recognition, she collaborated with Khalid in 2018, who was having a breakthrough year himself with his own music. They released the now streamed 3 billion times Lovely. It's an absolute bop. It's gorgeous. The music video is also gorgeous. It's a fan fave and also a fave of the public. And maybe this is around the time when most people found her music or really became acquainted with who she was. But no, not for me. We've got to wait another year before I'm hit with the Billie Eilish infatuation. So in July of 2018, Billie released the creepy and disturbing music video for You Should See Me in a Crown, which centered around spiders crawling out of her mouth, and it's really from this point onwards that Eilish and her music gets coined as depressive and dark and as having a bad influence on young people. And I think this is really where the beginnings for me as a fan starts. Yes, Billie was labelled as dark and depressing and as emo, but to an extent that's because she was. And for a 14-year-old who had just suffered friendship issues and was low-key depressed herself, not knowing what mental health issues were at the time, having Billie come out in interviews saying that she was sad and she didn't understand why such a taboo was being made out of it really resonated with me. And for anyone who doesn't understand what it is about Billie, it's really that ability she has to be so honest and write so rawly about how she's feeling. You know, of course, previous artists before her have talked about their mental health and had written about it in their music. But I think what sets Billie apart, at least for me anyway, was the way she talked about in interviews. You know, she wouldn't talk about the depression like it was separate from her or like it was this thing in the distance she suffered from. She spoke about it as if it was her. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's almost like she didn't speak about depression, more so that the depression just permeated throughout her. I don't really know if that makes sense, but for little 14-year-old me who felt misunderstood by everyone, I suddenly felt seen and I suddenly felt like I had a friend. You know, here was someone a couple of years older than me saying things that I felt but didn't know how to express at the time because I'd never had mental health issues before. Whilst tabloids and parents stressed about her music depressing their kids, it was the kids who were secretly or maybe unknowingly depressed that found the sense of comfort in both Billie and her music. Also, on a more personal level, I felt an even deeper connection to Billie because of her background with dance. I, like Eilish, had grown up wanting nothing more than to be a dancer, and although I didn't suffer an injury that took me out like Billie did, I did have that heartbreaking and humbling realization that I just wasn't good enough to make it. And for those getting push content of Billie Eilish on all their algorithms, they'd have seen the interview that dropped on Vanity Fair's YouTube page on October the 18th. Funny enough, the same day this podcast drops for you guys to watch. Coincidence? I think not. Some could call me a mastermind, just some, maybe few. October the 18th has become synonymous with a national holiday in the Billie fandom, for it's the day that Billie recorded and continues to record to this day as far as I'm aware. The same interview, 1 year apart, every year for Vanity Fair. It's safe to say it's a tradition. However, what made this interview blow up and grab the attention of people that perhaps didn't otherwise care for her was the drastic change you saw in Billie from her pre-fame self to her post-fame self. I mean, it was heartbreaking, and it remains heartbreaking to this day when you go back and watch it. All the youth and innocence and light that Billie carried with her in 2017 completely disappeared in the 2018 interview. You could see in her face and her eyes of how miserable she was. Billie said that that time in her life, the sort of 2018 to early 2019 period, was the most miserable she'd ever been. In an interview that came out a couple years later with Gayle King, she said she didn't think she'd make it to 17. The only thing that really kept her alive, quite honestly, was her mum and doing shows. In truth, she didn't particularly enjoy the songwriting process. She found writing music and writing an album excruciating because she was constantly comparing herself to her brother, who she believed was far better and far more talented than she was. You know, that's that same imposter syndrome that really started when her brother, I guess, was the more successful actor and creative growing up. It was also in this time when Billie was in her peak teenage years. She was 16/17, making When We All Fall Asleep and missing out on the normal teenage experiences all her friends around her were going through. If this wasn't enough, she was also injured all the time, doing shows on sprained ankles and shin splints, whilst being in a relationship that was evidently tearing her apart. The fans hate this relationship. So having to cope with all of the above, whilst also being mentally ill, whilst also having to deal with the noise that comes with fame, I suppose it should have come with no surprise that when Billie's debut album did drop in March of 2019, it explored themes such as suicidality, climate change, addiction, substance abuse, and heartbreak. Ever since the release of You Should See Me in a Crown, the media had dubbed her as dark and creepy, as I mentioned. So in her mind, Billie thought, why the hell not lean into that? Her whole thing was, I am sad, and people are sad, so why is it so controversial to write about it? Why is it weird to write music about how I feel? Once again, the simplicity in which Billie said stuff would just blow my 14-year-old brain. So like most people in the world, the album was how I first properly discovered Billie. I saw everyone and their mothers talking about and reposting the album online. So I thought, what the hell? Let's give this a try. Let's give this a listen. My only prior knowledge of Billie being some interviews I'd binged on empty Sundays when I didn't for once have school or dance to attend to. But it wasn't till the second listen, when I listened to the album with headphones and heard the panning on Xanny, a song I related to not because my friends were addicted to Xanax, but because I related to the estrangement from your friends, that everything changed. I became obsessed. And so did the rest of the world. For Bad Guy went on to top every chart you could think of and was played so much it became a song you'd groan at as soon as you'd hear the first 10 seconds. Why this album worked on a critical level was because of the honest songwriting, the dark bedroom pop production, the lack of genre, the imagery and sonic world the album created, the honesty and range of important topics that were addressed so naturally. But for me, it was really the first time I'd ever intentionally listened to music. I personally did not grow up in a music household. Music was never played when I was growing up. It wasn't you hear of some childhoods or of your friends or whatever, of whoever, where music's on in the kitchen or it's on in the shower or, you know, whenever, when you're chilling as a family, maybe playing a game. Like, some people just grow up with music. That's not how things were for me. The only time I'd ever listen to music was in the car when my parents would whack on a radio station. For me, When We All Fall Asleep was my first ever introduction to music. It was the first time I ever felt music, you know? I felt the lyrics of Listen Before I Go, the harmonies of When the Party's Over, the disillusionment of Xanny, the keys of All the Good Girls Go to Hell. Not only had I had countless Sundays to fall in love with Billie as a person, with the wonders of the YouTube algorithm providing me with never-ending interviews, but I also had now fallen in love with her music too. I'll come back to this heavy parasocial relationship that develops later, but for now, let's read out some of the stats this album got. Billie became the youngest ever female artist to secure a #1 album in the UK. She became the youngest artist since Lord's Royals to secure a #1 single. I believe Lord released Royals around 2014, could be incorrect. She also secured the title as being the youngest person in Grammy history to win in all 4 major categories, that being Best New Artist, Album of the Year, Record of the Year, and Song of the Year. And the album became the most streamed album of 2019. Not too shabby for a debut. But typically, when people reach their peak, the public loves to tear them down. The criticism around Billie's style and making disturbing music intensified, as did accusations of her being part of the Illuminati. But where things went from distasteful headlines to full-blown hate and cancellation was in 2021 with the drop of Billie's Blonde Shell Blonde cover with Vogue. I honestly can't tell you how massive this shoot was. This cover separated Billie from the image the public had of her with the image she wanted to create for herself. To dive into Billie's style quickly, a large contributing factor to her fame and her attention online was due to the way she dressed. She was characterised by bold colours and baggy clothing, shorts that went down to her calves, heavy chains and decked out jewellery, chunky trainers and mobs of brightly coloured hair, whether it was silver, teal, blue or green. The reasons, you may ask? Well, there were 2. #1, she didn't want the media to sexualise or comment on her figure when she was still a teenager figuring out her own relationship with her body. And #2, she knew that wearing bold outfits would grab people's attention and therefore make them more inclined to listen to her. Pretty genius, honestly pretty genius, and again, fresh for the pop industry to see. This image alongside her unorthodox music meant she broke out of the mould pop artists were normally pigeonholed into. She didn't adhere to sequined leotards and media-trained spiels. She broke the boundaries of what the media knew a young female musician to be. And that's really why I think people marvelled at her when she first came onto the scene. So why did she do it? Why did she go blonde? Well, what happened during the lockdown after the boom of When We All Fall Asleep and the distinguishable green root hairstyle was a slight identity crisis for Miss Eilish. She suddenly felt like she was this Billie Eilish parody. She wasn't dressing how she wanted to. She was dressing how Billie Eilish would instead. And so in her mind, the only way to really break out of that mould was to do the direct opposite thing Billie Eilish, in the media's eyes, would do. And that, my friends, was to wear a baby pink corset with cleavage on show, topped by a 1920s platinum blonde pin-up. To say it broke the internet is an absolute understatement. Her post on Instagram broke records and sent the Daily Mail into frenzy. People were outraged that Eilish, once this role model to young girls for making them feel like they could wear what they wanted, was now submitting to pleasing the male gaze and sexualising her body in an attempt to apparently market herself. But that was the media's view. And that response was exactly what Billie had expected. She said the fact that the media took it as a marketing ploy and started commenting on her body proved how necessary it was for her to dress in baggy clothing in the first place. The Vogue cover was misread as a marketing ploy because that's what tabloids believed the only reason for her wearing such an outfit could possibly be for. They simply couldn't understand that Billie's blonde look wasn't for attention, but quite simply because she wanted to feel sexy instead. So the new era of Billie begins as she starts the promotion for her sophomore album, Happier Than Ever. But the love the internet showered Billie with in 2019 had turned majoritatively sour by the time 2021 rolled round. People were tired of her being everywhere, of breaking records, of winning all the awards, of wearing sometimes the most ridiculous outfits. The internet had had enough. And so when she was promoting her single Lost Cause in Pride Month with a caption that read, "I love girls," the public went into attack mode and cancelled Billie for queer baiting. Effectively, there was a belief that Billie was pretending to be part of the queer community by saying she loved girls, to get the queer community to engage with her music. The fact that she did not come out as queer but had a boyfriend instead whose old tweets revealed hints of racism and homophobia meant a shitstorm surely ensued. Oh, it was bad, guys. It was a really bad time to be a fan of Billie. And if this wasn't enough, an old video of Billie lip-syncing to a Tyler, the Creator song resurfaced, where she's seen singing along to the part that has an Asian slur in it. So in came the headlines that Billie was also racist. As a fan, I was crushed, but not because I felt like my favourite artist had failed me. I was crushed because I felt like the public had failed her. For me, the whole queer baiting debacle was an absolute joke. I don't think for 1 minute Billie was trying to profit off or market herself as queer and get the gay community into her music. To me, she posted a music video about friendship, about female friendship. For her to say she loves girls doesn't mean she suddenly has to be in love with them. I think the public misreading that isn't Billie's fault. On a side note, as of 2023, Billie officially came out as bisexual. So if you wanted to spin things round, you could say that the public put a shit ton of pressure on Billie to come out before she was perhaps even ready. So yeah, it was that definitely riled me up. But of course, Billie repeating an Asian slur is absolutely unacceptable. Did she say it intentionally? Of course not. She was 13 years old, singing along to a song by one of her favourite artists. She had no idea what the word meant, but it was right of Billie to apologise for that and acknowledge that it upset and disappointed so many fans and so many people. Off the back of all this drama, people decided to sell their concert tickets for the Happier Than Ever tour, which had just been announced, with some even burning their merch too. But for me, Billie was still the intangible and sublime entity she'd been for me since 2018. I was 16 years old when I successfully bought tickets to see Billie at the O2 in London for her 2022 show. What I didn't know, however, was the extent to which I'd screw everything up in the lead up to that day. If you followed me on TikTok since the beginning of this summer, you'd have heard this tragic story before. But for those of you that have no idea what happened, let me paint a picture for you, shall I? It was 2021 and I bought tickets to see Billie for me and my two best friends. At this time in my life, the parasocial relationship I had to Miss Eilish had only grown to an absolute insane amount. Billie was really the place where my happiness was derived from. I was still lacking a lot of friends after the friendship issues of 2019. I literally had one friend to my name, I'm not even kidding. And I once and for all had come to the conclusion that I wouldn't be able to pursue a career in dance. I'd also just come out of a lockdown where I spent my spare time binge watching every Billie interview that was available on the internet, as well as diving into a brand new world of music that was presented to me through Billie's radio show with her dad on Apple Music. So Billie had suddenly integrated herself into my life in a very, very big way. But what had come with the letting go of dance was also the letting go of caring for myself. Like a lot of us, lockdown was a time where everyone was getting into diet culture and exercising. For me, what I saw as an opportunity to get toned for dance slowly blossomed into disorderly eating. What kept me stable was fueling my body for dance. You know, I wouldn't let anything jeopardize that for me. But then dance let me down. I was getting rejected from every single audition. My technique was so far behind everyone else's. My training was so poor. It failed me. And so I just gave up. I was starting sick form and eating less and less each month, with the comfort that the eating disorder gave me and the comfort of Billie supporting me to make me feel safe. I didn't feel the need for friends because I had Billie. I didn't feel the need to go out and be social because the only energy I could muscle up was to do my homework and continue going to my dance classes. Despite literally, I wish I was joking, despite literally not even being able to get off the floor, like jump off the floor. It was traumatizing. Anyway, what I'm trying to get at is that having no life really didn't bother me because Billie was my life. You know, she'd release a book or a perfume or a documentary or a song and immediately I was happy. So it hits April of 2022, 3 months before I meant to go to the concert, and out of nowhere, but definitely something I should have seen coming, I was hospitalized for a month with anorexia, having everyone around me telling me I was going to die. Dramatic. Listen, we're not going to make this like super sad, okay? It doesn't need to be super sad, but what was my natural response to all of this? To just listen to more Billie Eilish music. I don't know if it was a state of denial, but it was more just like a state of like, how do I compute that? Someone's telling me I'm going to die. Cool. Like, I don't know how I meant to respond to that because I was so ill. I just didn't see what they saw. But ultimately what got me to eat again was music. It was a concert in May to see Gracie Abrams, an artist Billie had put me on to. So I ate and I began recovery, not really because I wanted to even go to the concert, but because I honestly had no choice. It was either go home or go to an inpatient's. So after a month of eating, it was the concert motivation that did in fact get me home. I made it to the concert, whoopee-doo, with the rule that I'd have to give up my standing tickets in exchange for seated ones instead. Where things went wrong with Billie, however, was that it was the first concert I'd be standing for. And not just that, I'd also be queuing for 12 hours. And not just that, I'd also be doing 10,000 steps without even realising after being on bed rest since March. And prior to that, not even, barely having the energy to walk. Again, I can't be more clear with the fact that every step I took made me want to cry. I was so tired and exhausted. So you can start to see how things quickly went downhill. The team of nurses and therapists that looked after me all heavily advocated for me to be seated at this concert, but nothing was going to get in the way of me seeing Billie. I told them if I didn't see her the way I'd been dreaming of since 2018, then for me, there was no point in recovery. There'd be no reason to get better if getting better didn't get me where I wanted to be. They begrudgingly complied, which takes us to June the 16th, 2022, the day of the concert and the day after my 17th birthday. I wake up at 4 a.m. to travel to the O2 with my friends, where we start queuing for 6. It's a summer's day, reaching heights of 30 degrees. As mentioned, we've done crazy amounts of steps before the doors even open for the concert. But what was the thing that killed me? Not drinking any water. Listen, the most painful thing about all of this is that the lack of hydration was nothing to do with the anorexia. I just simply forgot. I honestly just simply forgot. It's about 6:15 p.m. and the doors have opened. We're about 3 lines, if that, behind barricade. And already I'm bummed because I wanted barricade. This is how intense a parasocial relationship was, okay? I've been dreaming of this day for years. All I wanted was to be as close to Billie as physically possible. So we're 3 rows behind. I'm a little bit bummed out, but I'm like, whatever. But then my body starts doing some weird things. And I know this feeling. I know how my body's feeling. I know what my body's response is. The hot and cold shivers, the vision going, the hearing muffled. I was going to faint. I tugged my friend on the arm and I was like, I'm going to faint. So she alerts security. The C's part. I am hauled over barricade by security. And I walk off and am escorted to the medical centre, if you call it that, to the medical tent, if you call that, to backstage. So this lovely medic finds us seats in a really good part of the arena, to be fair. I think it's in the second tier of the seating at the O2. It's not bad. It's not the nosebleeds. But of course, all I'm thinking about as I'm watching the show and I'm watching the crowd is how I was 3 rows behind barricade and now I was at the back of the arena. I was distraught. I had a breakdown. I sobbed through the whole entire show and hyperventilated throughout the whole entire show. It wasn't cute. And honestly, that experience really, really, really damaged me and really, really scuppered my recovery. I came back from that show and woke up the next day refusing to eat because I was like, what the hell is the point of any of this if it didn't even give me my dream, which if it didn't even give me the one thing I held on to, which was Billie. Yeah, I guess I just went into self-defense mode and self-protection mode and just put up a wall where it was like, right, you cannot engage with Billie's content anymore. What I didn't know in 2022, however, was that it would be 3 years before I'd get the chance to see Billie again. So, Hit Me Hard and Soft is released, an absolutely impeccable album. The tour is announced. I'm thrilled. Here we go again. Me and this best friend that joins me in the medical tent, we get our tickets. We are absolutely thrilled. It's the day before Billie's concert and I am super, super anxious. I'm just anxious that I'm going to faint again, even though I've been to multiple concerts in the past 3 years standing and I've been great. And obviously at this point, this year, at this point, I'm way further into recovery, put on a lot more weight, worked on my strength a lot, put in the work and put in the effort to be better. But of course, I'm scarred by 2022 and I haven't been back to the O2 since. Yeah. So I'm super anxious. I wake up at 4 a.m, get to the venue for 6, just like last time. I'm by myself this time because my friend's joining me later. And it's another 30-degree summer day. I'm sweating profusely, overheated. I'm having my breakfast, I'm having my snacks, I'm having my food, and I'm getting shaky. And I'm feeling faint. And I am honestly on the verge of tears, like, oh my God, I'm going to faint again. Like, I can't go through this again. I can't, because for it to happen again, I really don't know what my response would be. And also because I'd created this distance from Billie, I didn't know how the concert would go. I didn't know if it'd throw me right back into that parasocial relationship again. 3 p.m. comes round in the queue. I get dressed into my outfit. I do my makeup and hair. I'm eating all this food. Like, I'm on such a high, and I'm like, you know what? I feel good. I feel really, really good. Hilariously, we get into the venue. I'm feeling great. My friend, she starts to feel faint. You actually can't make it up. You can't make it up. She starts to feel faint. It's a whole drama. We get her on her back in the crowd with her legs in the air. And she was on the verge of tears, bless her, because she was like, Helena, we can't do this again. We can't do this again. And she was like, and I don't know, like, why me? She's never fainted ever before in her life. She was like, this has never happened to me before. I don't even know what's happening to my body. Like, we just can't go through this again. I'm not gonna let this happen to us. I was laughing because I thought, that's hilarious. Like, that's hilarious. What an eye for an eye this is. And I was honestly just happy to be there and be okay. Anyway, I get her up and I say to her, right, if you don't feel better by the end of this song, because obviously there's a playlist playing in the background, then we're jumping out and we're going to medical. Guys, I kid you not, I would say literally a minute after she stands up, Billie's set begins. Billie's set begins. So obviously there's the goosebumps, there's the shock. My friend all of a sudden just switches and is a-okay and on an adrenaline rush, and she's great. So we're both great. But it gets to the part in the set where Billie plays TV, and for me, that's where the emotion and the gravitas, if that's the right word, of all of the years that have gone by just hits me like a truck. When the depression and suicidality had taken over from the eating disorder, there was this hour-long playlist I'd listened to from start to finish that made me feel comforted and understood, and TV was one of those songs. So hearing it in an arena full of similarly damaged people, with my best friend who'd seen me through all the stages of recovery, hearing it and actually seeing Billie with my own eyes, oh my gosh, guys, it brought me to tears. Like, a single tear, maybe multiple tears, actually just started falling very poetically down my face. It sounds so cringy, but it reminded me of who I was and of how sad things were, and I guess it reminded me of who I am now, and I just felt so proud of myself for getting myself to a place where I could be there, where I could jump and dance and cue and sweat and still feel so good and so strong. It reminded me of that Vanity Fair interview from October the 18th in 2018, when Billie was a bundle of misery. It was this mad realization as well that she wasn't a god. She wasn't a poster in my room or just a voice in my ears. She was just a girl. A 23-year-old girl. I was so proud of her. I finally saw Billie Eilish, and not in the literal way where she was in front of my eyes, but in the same way that the public saw her when she first came into the music scene. I saw Billie Eilish, a girl whose talent and raw honesty had literally helped shape and save lives. I was just one person in this arena of 20,000 who had gone through some shit. Billie there as this constant in our lives, and this was just one show in one city. I looked around me and saw 20,000 people dressed in jorts and bandanas. I looked around me and saw 20,000 people who all needed Billie. I guess I was reminded of where I was 3 years prior in the exact same arena, and it hit me that I no longer needed her. I wasn't one of these people sobbing as soon as she came on at Barricade. I wasn't one of these people that, couldn't see her as Billie Eilish, a human being, but saw her as the sublime entity I once saw her as. By avoiding Billie and Billie's content out of fear of becoming emotionally attached again, I'd actually unknowingly let her go. No longer did my life evolve around her. No longer did I cry if she changed her hair colour or came to London, or get adrenaline rushes when she put out a new song. No longer did I listen to the 30th on repeat for 2 hours straight, or get lost in the relatability of Listen Before I Go. I'd grown up, and Billie was the nanny McPhee that had left me to help the next person who was feeling lonely and misunderstood. And after a bittersweet interlude, I was jumping around to bury a friend. Having that moment and that day really made it all worth it to me. You know, to be completely honest with you guys, like, yeah, I'm still a mess. I'm still recovering with varying levels of success and have days where it's hard to see the point of getting even better. But I would choose recovery every single time if it meant I could relive what I experienced and felt at this show. Oh, I've got goosebumps. Oh, it's just getting emotional, isn't it? It was, when I say it was a life-affirming moment, it was really and truly life-changing. So I guess that brings us up to speed. And to conclude, as much as Billie has been this international marvel, racking up broken records and awards in pretty much every way possible, what sets her apart from all the other pop artists or young female musicians that have been around and broken through is her ability to connect to an individual and her ability to make every song and interview feel deeply personal to her, whilst striking in intimacy and relatability with whoever's on the receiving end too. A comment I saw online, which I think sums it up perfectly, is that whilst the Swifties unite in supporting their favourite artist together, the Billie fans argue over who feels like they know Billie the best instead. At the end of the day, it's Billie's writing on topics that resonate with troubled teens that has seen her gain the cult following and intense parasocial relationships that her fan base has become synonymous with. We're all broken people who feel like she's our best friend. I know this because I was that troubled teen. People say this all the time, that its meaning can sometimes get lost. But truly, if it wasn't for Billie Eilish, I wouldn't be where I am today. I would not be sitting here with this mic in my hand and this camera in front of me talking to you. That is the truth. If it wasn't for the confluent algorithms of social media, which provided me with endless content of the upcoming teen sensation, I never would have got into music the way I have. Everything I've listened to and everything I've learned from studying this industry all traces back to her. Whether it was the radio show she presented with her dad or her and her brother posting songs on their Instagram stories, every piece of music I've put on has led me to another artist, which has led me to another artist, which has led me to another artist. Moses Sumney, Drake, LCD Soundsystem, Leith Ross, Radiohead, it all traces back to Billie. Bon Iver, Gracie Abrams, Doja Cat, Lil Nas X, Adrian Lenker, all of it goes back to her. The only possible way I could have ended Six Notes was in the same way it all started, which is with Billie Eilish. I realised as I was making this episode of Six Notes, it's just one big metaphor of my life. This whole podcast is one big metaphor of my life. Yes, starting and ending with Billie fits into the foundations of this show. That being the web of connections that underpins the industry, how everything and everyone is influenced by each other, how what goes round comes round. But this show has also become a microcosm of my life. Without Billie, I never would have found all these other artists. I never would have cared about music or pursued a career in radio and podcasting. I never would have found a friend or a reason to be okay. She may be posters on my wall and music in my ears, but she's a big enough part of my life that everyone knows there's no Helena without the 14-year-old girl whose heart she captured. So I guess the final question I'll leave you with is this. Was it ever really about 6 Notes of Separation? Or was it always about Billie Eilish?